is everyone doing? I know it is late in the afternoon on a Wednesday, so thank you so much for being here. My name is Akanksha. I am a customer engineer, and in this session, we're going to talk to you about finding the right use case for generative AI for your startup or small business. So again, my name's Akanksha. I'm a Gen AI specialist customer engineer. I've been at Google for close to 3 years now, and yeah, I'm based out of Austin. I'm really excited to be here. So today you're going to hear from myself, and you're going to hear from Francisco, who's the co-founder and CTO of Hunty. So we have a really exciting session planned for you. So in terms of what we'll cover today, we'll do a brief introduction, some background on what we're talking about, and then we'll talk about finding the right use case, adding value to your business, going to production with it. Then we'll hear about how Hunty, our customer, implemented all of that, and then we'll wrap up and have some Q&A. So again, my name's Akanksha, Gen AI specialist customer engineer. And what that means is I have the opportunity to work with 10, 20 startups or small businesses at any given time. And that means that I really am able to meet with a lot of customers and identify a lot of patterns. And this really gives me the opportunity and the privilege to figure out what's working, what are the use cases that people are using a lot, what are the pitfalls, what are the key things to look out for that I can correct my customers on, things like that. So with that, when I think of Gen AI, I think of it as a three-pronged process. And so a lot of my customers, Gen AI is the hot topic right now, and they come to me and they say, we want to use Gen AI for our business. We think it's really going to be a game changer. This is something that we want to do. And I think of these three prongs as super important. The first one being finding out the right use case, figuring out what is the core problem you want to solve. Next one is building a business, so not just solving a problem, but solving a problem that's actually going to add value to your business, and then going to production. We hear a lot of demos, and we hear a lot of people say, Gen AI, you can get started with the click of a button, or you can get an app running in 2 minutes, something as easy as that, right? And while that's true, I think it's very easy to experiment with Gen AI to get something up and going, to get an MVP out there. But going to production with Gen AI is equally as hard. It's pretty new, a little over a year. And so really going to production with it is where I see a pitfall for a lot of my customers. We sort of stop at that experimentation stage, and we're not able to get to production. So just talking through a little bit of that mindset is what I'll be doing today. And so in this three-step process, when it comes to identifying a problem, it's really about what needs fixing, what needs improving. There's lots of things in your business that Gen AI can help fix. Developer productivity, internal productivity, understanding your data better, understanding large documents better. The list can go on and on. But identifying what is the main problem that you really need to fix that's going to add value to your business. The next step being categorizing that use case, right? So saying, what type of solution is going to help? Is this, one where we want to implement RAG? Or do we want to create a model of our own? Or do we just want to make a couple API calls to Gemini, for example, right? And then the last step being working towards implementation. So what products really align with this? And I see a lot of my customers actually doing this backwards. They start with the product. They say, hey, Google has this really cool product that you released. I saw a blog post about it. And they come to me and say, we want to use this product. And I tell my customers all the time, let's not even talk about model names. Let's not talk about products. Let's start with the core problem we're trying to fix, talk about how you're going to add value to your business, and then we can talk products. Because there are tons of ways to solve a problem, even within Gen AI, right? You can use a model, you can use a pre-made solution or a pre-made tool in Vertex. There's lots of ways. So starting with the product tends to be a bit of a pitfall. So I think it's a very directional process going left to the right here. So I'll give you an example of this, right? Identifying the problem looks like making a statement like, I need to hire more people at my company as soon as possible. We're growing, we're scaling, we need to get more people. And then categorizing that use case into what it really looks like in a bucket is saying, Specifically, I want to get through resumes more quickly. There's lots of things you can do to improve the hiring process, right? And one aspect of them is getting through resumes more quickly. And after you do those 2 steps, you can say, okay, I want to use a doc parsing solution that is equipped with Gen AI, and this is really going to help me. As opposed to coming to your cloud provider, or coming to your customer engineer or your account team and saying, hey, Doc AI seems really cool, we want to use Doc AI. I really recommend starting from the beginning and putting in that work to then get to Doc AI. And Doc AI may not even be the solution. There's lots of different options. And so I talk about finding out your problem, figuring out what is the core thing you want to solve, and putting it into a use case pillar. So in my experience working with a lot of customers, these are the 6 use case pillars that I like to categorize most of their use cases into, right? Internal productivity, pretty self-explanatory. People at your company, they're spending a lot of time just going through emails. There's a lot of things they can become more productive and efficient at. These middle 3, I think, are key in the startup and small business world from my experience, right? Improving a product, building a product, or having conversation with users. And this is about, if AI is at the core of your business, then you really want to improve the product so it's serving your customers better. Or maybe you want to build a brand new product. Maybe you're really early stage as a startup, right? So those are key. And then conversation with users, as a startup or small business, I'm sure most of you don't have a ton of resources to be able to one-on-one interact with every single customer, right? So I see a lot of customers wanting to interact with their user base more effectively using Gen AI. And then a couple others like marketing campaigns, getting the word out, reaching your customer base a little better, and then better and faster coding. But again, those middle 3, improving a product, building a product, and conversing with your users are the key ones that I see in the startup and small business space. And so after you've identified these different buckets, that's when I go to my customers, and that's when I say, okay, now let's talk products, right? I won't go through every single one of these, but I do this because you'll see Gemini is listed in almost every single one. There's a lot of overlap here. And this is because you can solve a problem, especially with Gen AI, in a multitude of different ways. And so depending on some considerations like the amount of resources you have, what your timeline is, that can determine which of the options listed you can do, right? So for building a product, you can use Gemini, you can use Vertex Search and Conversation, or you can use an open source model or one of our partner third-party models from the Model Garden, right? So there's lots of different options, and that's why we recommend don't start with the product. Start with the problem, categorize your use case, and then let's look at all the different implementation options there are. So the next thing that I tell my customers to keep in mind is you want to build a business, right? And this is, again, a 2-pronged approach, and there's 2 options here. If AI is not the core of your business, go with the low-hanging fruit, right? Use Gen AI to do what you can fix quickly and right away. Go with the low-hanging fruit. Try to make your life or your team's life easier and more efficient as soon as possible. And if AI is at the core of your business, then let's talk about those use case pillars about building a product or improving a product or conversing with your users more, right? So it's really about demonstrating value add. And I talk about all of this because, the company that you're here with or the team that you're representing, you can probably think of like 5 to 10 problems that Gen AI can solve. And just because Gen AI can solve 10 problems that are happening doesn't mean it's the right time or the place to pick all 10 of those problems to solve, right? So really figuring out, is AI at the core of your business or not? Is there a low-hanging fruit you're trying to get? And how are you really going to demonstrate value add? So thinking about that from the very beginning is important to pinpointing the use case that you want to use. So now I'm going to talk about getting to production. And you might be thinking, if I'm just ideating right now, that's way down the line. Why do I need to be thinking about getting to production? But that can actually be a game changer in choosing the right use case, right? What the session is all about. And so thinking about getting to production is really key in the very beginning because, again, with Gen AI, it's super easy to get started. But because it's so new and there's so many factors you have to think about, getting to production is where a lot of our customers, slow down on that racetrack. So I'm going to talk about a couple points, and these are going to be questions to keep in mind that you and your team should be asking for each of your use case that you're considering. And maybe for some of them you'll say, oh, we didn't even think about that. And that's a red flag that you can highlight and say, we need to go back to the drawing board, ideate on this use case a little bit so we can fully flesh it out. So when we start experimenting, we are ready to go to the finish line with this. So starting with responsible AI, again, this is key. This is a brand new technology. So some questions like, do you need safety filters? What is your backup if hallucinations do occur? We from Google are putting in the work to try to reduce hallucinations as much as possible. Doesn't mean they don't happen. So making sure you have a backup. Are you going to have a human in the loop at some point? What are you going to do to make sure your customers are not getting the wrong information if hallucinations do occur? And then, are there legal guidelines for your industry? So healthcare, for example, has a lot of guidelines about patient data to keep in mind, things like that. Next one is customization, and this one is huge. The first one is, we've all heard about the art of prompt design or prompt engineering, and I call it an art very deliberately because it has a lot of trial and error. And so, are you putting these different experimentation techniques into your timeline? Or have you tried all of them? A one-shot approach, few-shot, chain of thought, figuring out the prompt that works for a model really takes a lot of time and is key. And then other customization options like different parameters, so temperature, p-value, k-value, all of those things can actually vastly change the type of results that you get from the models that you're using, so making sure you're experimenting with those. And those are sort of what I call the top tier of customization, right? After that, you can consider adapter tuning or parameter efficient tuning, which is maybe, we want to give a little bit of data, prompt engineering didn't do the job, or it only fixed 70% of the problems. So then thinking of the next level of customization, and after that we can keep going, right? Do you want to fine tune a model, or do you want to create an LLM on your own? And these are not mutually exclusive, right? We have some customers that they start and they say, with the resources we have now, we want to get to production quick. So we're going to start with just prompt design, and they're working on fine-tuning in the background, and 6-8 months down the road is when they're ready to do fine-tuning. So you don't have to pick and choose one of these. You just have to make sure you're accounting for all of them and figuring out what makes sense for your team. After that, we have quality. We spend a lot of time trying to find the best model, right? There's tons of articles out there comparing all the different models on the market out there, and we want to make sure, we want to choose the best model out there, and that's going to solve all the problems. I think that's a bit of a misconception. You could choose the best model out there, and it could still, there's still work you're going to have to do on your end, even if you get the top-of-the-line industry model. That's not always the solution to the problem, right? So internally, you need to find your own evaluation metrics. You need to set your own success criteria. Don't rely on the fact that a model performs well based on benchmarks, industry benchmarks, right? Put in the work to make sure that you identify what your success criteria is, regardless of what model you're using. And then other things like, are you doing the work to use techniques like grounding to make sure you can improve your results and improve your quality? Next point is capacity planning. This one's pretty self-explanatory. We all know that, when spikes happen, you need to make sure you have the compute to back it up, and compute is not easy to get these days. And so just making sure you're planning for that ahead of time so you don't run into an issue where you're not able to serve your customers. And then this one's key, timeline, right? I think a lot of customers come to me and they say, hey, Gen AI is so easy. I saw a demo. I can build a Vertex search app with the click of a button in 5 minutes, so I want to put this out to my customers next week, right? So it's really key to really think about that timeline, and as you think about all these getting to production factors and questions that I've been talking about, it helps build a pretty realistic timeline where it's very easy to get started, and it's going to take a little bit of time to make sure it's good to go to serve your customers. So, do you have the resources? And the amount of resources you have can help determine your timeline. And this can also tie into other factors like the customization techniques that I was talking about. So if you choose to do adapter tuning or do fine tuning, you're going to have to adjust your timeline for that. And then the last one is staying up to date. Over the past 2 days, Google Cloud has released a bunch of updates for our Vertex portfolio. And almost every day, something is changing in the Gen AI industry. I mean, I almost lose my mind keeping up with all of it, right? So making sure you're staying up to date, because you can always keep improving your Gen AI solution, especially since we're in this era where we keep improving the technology that's being put out there. So making sure you're staying up to date. Are there new techniques you want to implement? Let's say you put something out to production using prompt design, but if that's not optimal, making sure you're working on adapter tuning in the background so you can roll that out to your users. Things like that. So I talked about this in theory, and at this point, I want to bring up Francisco, who's the co-founder and CTO of Hunty, and he is going to talk about how they actually went through this entire process and implemented it very successfully. So give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Akanksha. I'm very excited to be with all of you guys. So I'm going to start telling you a story. Our story is a very important story for the region, and I mean Latin America, because this story starts with a problem that concerns the job seeker. You, me, everyone in this room is a job seeker at some point in the market. And we realized that finding a job is a huge pain for most people. So we started thinking it doesn't have to. And that's where it all started. In 2021, we started as a mentoring service, completely bootstrapped with bare hands. Like, I was one of the first mentors, mentoring people trying to find a job that it was suitable for their profile and for a company in the market. Basically, you could say that our company was entirely a Google Drive filled with spreadsheets. And in the spreadsheets, we recorded all the information regarding the follow-up process of the mentoring service that we offered to these job seekers, that we called the Hunties. In 2022, we started to build like a digital platform. It was no code in the beginning. We used very simple technology to that. And we needed to do it because the data management became a really huge problem. We already had a lot of data in spreadsheets, and it was very complicated to manage all of that. So we needed to build a digital platform. In the beginning, it was no-code based, but then immediately we started to migrate between 2022 and 2023 to Google Cloud, building what I should call an AI-assisted product. And what does it mean? That the technology that we were implementing, even when we were using artificial intelligence in all the flavors that we all know, all of that, it was not the core of the business. And why? Because the job seekers, our customers, the people that we were helping, the thing that they value most was the companionship of another human in the loop. Think about it. When you are looking for a job, the thing that you really value the most is, imagine having someone next to you, giving you moral boost, giving you immediate feedback in a friendly way so that you can feel more encouraged and you really know your true weaknesses and strengths. So that was it. That was our thing until the end of 2022. And that led us to our second problem. And it was scalability. Why? Because despite all of this technology, all of this digital platform that we built around this mentoring service, the mentor was still the core value of the business. And so we had a human as a bottleneck. That was the second problem we had to solve, and we had to figure out how to solve. So 2023 was a really interesting year for us. It was really quite a journey. And we started in January, gradually stopping this mentoring service, because we already knew, even though this model already helped thousands of people, changed thousands of people's lives, it was not going to scale as we needed. We were never going to be able to help thousands of people month over month so that we can have a growing business all the time. So in January, we started doing so, and we also started at the same time doing some kind of pivot analysis. How are we going to redefine ourselves? So we gathered a very small team in our company with the best and brightest minds in our team, and we just put all of those people together to start thinking, how are we going to redefine ourselves? What is the next huge product that we are going to build? How we can build something that really has the technology as the core of the business so that we don't have this scalability problem. We really took quite a time for that. So you can realize that only until August, we came up with a new problem. We decided to stay in the HR market because we already had some, let's say, strategical advantage. Why? Because we helped a lot of people finding a job. We connected people with companies in that process. And there were already a lot of companies that knew who we were already. And people, for example, it's a funny story. In Colombia, everyone has a social group that has at least one person that found a job with Hunty or that knows someone that found a job with Hunty. So everybody knew who we were, and we really decided to make use of that. So we stayed in the same market space. And the best thing, from my point of view, was that we had a solution with technology as the core. And it was a very, really nice coincidence that we came up with using this new wave of the large language models happening at that time. What is the exact problem? I'm going to tell you in the next slide. So what happened next over that year? 1 month later, in September, we already had an MVP. It was very simple. It was broken. It was perfect for the users. But that was not the problem. Why we did so? Because that allowed us to really start getting feedback immediately from the customers. And that's kind of the things that you used to hear from the Y Combinator startup school, like, if you start thinking on a very complicated product from the beginning, you are losing your way. So we identify a simple problem. We built a very simple solution, although it was not perfect. The best way to identify how to transform that to a perfect product was to put that thing, however it was built, however it was broken, as soon as possible to the customers to start getting immediate feedback. And that was really, really great. So by the end of the last Q of that year, by December, we already had a product with several new features thanks to this quick iteration cycle that we were able to implement in our startup. And we were able also to close our first business customer. Okay? So this is kind of the timeline that we had to go through this last year. But what is the problem exactly that we choose after all of this? Our third problem concerns productivity, but productivity of the human resources teams of large companies, especially large companies. Why? Because the main statement, as you can see, is that it's really hard to recruit at scale. I don't know if maybe someone here feels identified with that, but we have noted that in large companies, imagine these kind of clients, logistics companies, call centers, BPOs, companies that for some contexts have high volumes of hiring, but they also have high rates of attrition. You have to hire a lot of people month over month. And you have to do that at scale, and you have to do fast. So usually those companies, they assemble large human resources teams with a lot of recruiters, and it's hard to coordinate that. We came up with a solution for this problem, which you can frame it as massive pre-screening of candidates. To put simply, imagine interviewing thousands of people, select the best ones, and getting a short list literally in a matter of minutes. And that's what we call now Anna. Anna is our digital recruiter. This agent, because it is an agent, or let's say it is a bit more complicated, I'm not going to make a debate here of what is an agent or what is not an agent, but let's call it an agent for the sake of simplicity, is able to interact via WhatsApp with candidates. Why WhatsApp? Because in Latin America, WhatsApp is like the operative system of the region. Everyone uses WhatsApp. So if you are looking for a job, you can just pass by a 7-Eleven, or you can search for a job in LinkedIn, and you can scan a QR code. and that directly sends you to WhatsApp, and you can start your interview over there. We realized that some of our customers already were hiring people via WhatsApp using another human. So that was the perfect interface for us. But the other part is that once a candidate finishes the interview, on the other side, there is a platform, a digital platform for the recruiter, for the company, for the stakeholder, the person that is looking for that ideal candidate. And in this platform, there is a whole new story around the core technology of just using an LLM, right? So the candidate finishes the interview, you can score the candidate. There are a bunch of agents and algorithms that we have built that score the candidate, structure and organize the data of the interviews, because the interviews as free as you can see two humans chatting on WhatsApp or any other messaging interface. So the conversation is completely free, but you can extract information also using LLMs. And that leads us to our final part, which is business value is not just plugging in a front-end interface to an API. Let's call it Gemini, let's call it Chat Bison, whatever. Because what we realize is that for companies to be able to adopt this core technology, let's say raw technology, it is not just enough with giving them an API endpoint. You have to literally build an entire product. You have to think about the proper interface, the proper UX, the proper UI, and there is a lot of product work around it. So in our interface, we provide the recruiter with all the details he needs or she needs to manage all the candidates and all the positions that they need, right? All the information, documents, scores, the detail on the answers and the questions of the interviews, the score of each question, and so on, okay? So the main part here is business value is not just that API. It's not just being a wrapper, as some people have framed in the market, you know? You have to build this product, and this is way more than this jet. And as a final statement regarding the technology, or maybe how we have been using the technology in this adventurous process, I will spend a few more time here. First, we kind of call it a micro-agent architecture, because massive pre-screening of candidates is already a complex process. It's a complex process. And you just can't hope to put a really very, very refined and very huge prompt to a single LLM request endpoint. That's not going to happen. So we noticed that by using smaller agents on smaller sub-processes works better. So we have this complex process. We are replacing humans into that process with decomposing that process in simpler sub-processes and assigning a special agent to one of those sub-processes. And those agents, they are not the same model under the hood, right? You have to use models, mixed models for each agent. You already have in Vertex AI, in the model garden, a lot of options, and in the market, you have a lot of options. So you need to understand that the same model is not going to work for each one of the steps if you are trying to replace a complex process. That is what happened to us. And as a third point, our baseline when we started building this product was just using really good prompting, few shot samples based on the knowledge you already had on the market or the specific use case you have, and making a very good use of chain of thought. And that means giving the model the time to think step by step towards the solution, okay? And that works even for those agents that we were using for smaller and simpler sub-processes, because there is complexity in every sub-step still. So that was very important. So that for us was basically, let's say, 95% of the baseline that we use for the product and deploying it to production, right? Of course, if you are concerning about hallucinations and grounding content, RAG, right? Vector databases and so on. That's also very important. But leaving that aside, you don't have to fine-tune models in the beginning, actually. Okay, that's very important. Latency is another point, very interesting here. Akanksha also framed that. It was not a priority for us because we used the heavier models, the models that the inference time is the larger, for use cases that are not real-time and that are not customer-facing. For example, when I'm interacting with a candidate, the agent that is interviewing the candidate, this agent is a model relatively not so heavy, so the answers are very fast. But when you have to score the results of the interview, you really need like advanced inference. You can use a better model for that, and you don't need actually to give the answer instantaneously after the candidate finished the interview. So that's a very important distinction as well. And now we are in a point where we are ready to fine-tune models, to actually start fine-tuning models and frame it. Think about it. After all that timeline that we have gone through, we are now ready, we think we are ready for fine-tuning models with all the data we already gathered for all the customers that already used and are now using Anna to recruit people at scale and blazingly fast. We are starting to consider that for the simplest sub-processes. That's the main thing. So that's another kind of a lesson that I want to share with all of you. You don't really have to start fine-tuning models, especially if you don't have enough data for, I mean, you know that you don't need that to fine-tune a model, but you need data, and you need the right data for fine-tuning a model. It's not big data, but you need the right data points for that. So we are at that point. And now we will be able to refine that remaining 5% that we still lack in the baseline with which we build the product. Okay? So that's our journey. That's where we are now with the help of Google Cloud and using all the infrastructure and services that they have provided to us. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Francisco. That was super, super helpful. And it's always good to see something go from theory to actually how they did everything that I was talking about.